I want to talk to you about my friend Charlie Crawford. He's a 10-time NFR qualifier.
Charlie Crawford, time to just shake it out and win. Got it on him fast, set
there
up.
We are.
Here's a dead
nice
money
run.
lead. You betcha 3-8.
That's an absolute perfect run. Timing was perfect from the time the first swing is up. He's got the control. Charlie made it happen by being timed up with his horse with the steer, and being able to not just rope, but to pick that steer's head up without changing the momentum for the heeler at all.
We know his beautiful wife, Jackie, all three of their beautiful children, the founder of the Liberty and Loyalty Foundation, which this year will exceed $1 million raised for military and first responders. I've said it 1,000 times. Charlie, it's time to rope, nod and ride, whip and spur. I want to welcome you to the Charlie Crawford Podcast. Let's ride.
Ropers, are you ready to step up your game? My online course, The Basics of Roping, is built for beginners, but packed with tools to help ropers of all levels sharpen their skills. With over 2 hours of instruction, frame-by-frame swing breakdowns, when to turn your hand over to keep your loop open, when and where to let go of your rope so you can get the horns in the middle of that loop, over 15 dummy drills to simulate real-life runs, you'll have everything you need to improve. Go to charlycrawford.training and follow the link under the course tab to get started today. Hello, everyone. Very excited to have Steve Kenyon on the podcast today. Steve, thanks for coming on.
Charlie, thank you. It's a pleasure to have a chance to spend a little bit of time with you, especially given the history that you and I have together.
Well, I was very excited about the fact because you do such a selfless job on showcasing everyone else so much that not many people get to know Steve Kenyon. And I thought, man, this would be awesome because we've known each other for a long time.
Right.
You were my high school rodeo announcer, went up there in Oregon. And, you know, I think with what you've done, you're so diverse in so many different things between the announcing, your podcast, your stats that you bring on the Western Sports Roundup, the commentating you do during the NFR. Just such a talented guy. And I was like, man, it'd be cool to get to know the guy behind the mic.
Well, thank you for all of that. This is a sport that I evolved into way back when you were that kid team roping out of Canby, Oregon in high school rodeo, and I was learning how to announce. And you can attest to this and be honest. At that time, I really sucked. But I did. I had the pleasure of announcing every single rodeo in Oregon High School Rodeo for a lot of years and watched you grow up, watched Brenda Mays grow up, watched Bobby Moat come through high school rodeo back then in Oregon. And that's what kind of taught me how to be a rodeo announcer were those experiences. And one thing led to another. And now here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things. I was actually looking for one. I had a video, VHS tape a few years ago.
Oh my God, that thing's probably so old it's crunkling now.
It is. And I was, you were announcing it was one of my steer wrestling runs. And I was trying to find it when I was in the parking lot.
Charlie missed his calling. He should have been a professional bulldogger.
I loved it. It was my favorite.
Yeah.
I wasn't even good at it, but I loved it. And so just so everyone understands is I was a very, very memorable contestant. You know, especially when I started roping calves my sophomore year. Mm-hmm. So my freshman year, I didn't rope calves. I just seen it, hadn't been around it much. My dad didn't know much about it. I didn't know anything about it. I could rope good though.
Right.
I was strictly a team roper.
Right.
Well,
you could catch the neck fine
every single time.
Yeah.
But what I mean is I was very memorable. You didn't forget me because there's no way to forget me because I think
because you were always in a wreck.
Well, I cut 7 or 8 calf ropes my sophomore year. My horse got wrapped up 5 or 6 times.
Yep, I remember.
Got wrapped up. You know, I was very memorable.
You were memorable because you were always in a wreck. Yeah.
Remember, that's when the Spyderco knives first came out.
Yep.
And so when I first started roping calves, I had no idea when you rope the calf around and I roped it like a team roper. Mm-hmm. I got up there, pulled my slack like a team roper, threw my slack straight at the calf, jumped off, ran to the calf. Had no idea you're supposed to grab the rope and block the calf off.
Exactly.
That was all new to me. I had no idea. My dad didn't know either. We were all figuring this out together. He actually trained my calf horse in a couple weeks. My dad was real good with horses. He was a very good trainer. And he knew pressure and release. So we're working this calf horse on a log. And within a couple of weeks, this horse just has it figured out. Well, as I get it wrapped up in the first couple of high school rodeos, because I didn't know to grab the calf, and the calf shot behind me, wrapped my calf horse up. The next couple of weeks, my dad was out there in the round pen, and he was teaching the horse how to lay down. if he would wrap it up, the horse just learn he would teach it how to sit down. And I come home from school and he's in the round pen. I said, Dad, what are you doing? He said, I'm trying to teach this horse some self-defense.
Right.
Trying to help this horse stay alive. Because if you keep getting him wrecked, he's got to know that if he gets wrapped up, help is coming soon.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
not the panic.
Exactly. No, those were the days. I mean, we're all learning things. It's amazing though, Charlie, to think about how great that entire concept of high school rodeo, and now junior high school rodeo wasn't around when you and Bobby and Brenda and those other folks that I mentioned were competing. But if you'd have had junior high school rodeo back then, you'd have maybe been off to a start that much faster. And you'd have known a few more things about, what to do after you catch the calf so you don't get in a wreck.
Well, luckily, my dad invested in a Joe Beaver rope and tape.
There you go.
Props to Joe Beaver, because when he said you're supposed to grab the rope on the way to the calf, my dad and I looked at each other and go, that's going to be a key component.
I never thought of that.
So props to Joe B for keeping me alive.
Yeah, there it is. Well, Joe B's taught a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
we were just strictly team ropers. And so, I always enjoyed when you were announcing at such a young age because of the stats you brought. You knew when every contestant won or did something or something funny on that individual. And so it was an enjoyable experience.
At that time, I was not a very good rodeo announcer.
Well, I just remember
some people will tell you maybe I'm not now. I don't know. But the thing that kept people wanting me to come and announce your rodeo was that I knew all you guys. I had a chance to get to know all of you personally. I kept track of points and who was qualifying and who was doing what, when, where, why, and how. And that was I knew all the kids. And that to this day, that has still been a part of what I think my job is, either as a broadcaster or when I get the opportunity to go into a rodeo arena and announce a rodeo, is to know everybody. I remember the very first rodeo I ever went to. It was in St. Paul, Oregon, and it was about 1969, 1970, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. And I was 8, 9, 10 years old. And I think we were up in that neighborhood because my dad had, when I got into 4-H, I had a hog project. And there was a fellow up in that neighborhood, a little town called Jervis, Oregon, that you'll remember being from Canby, who was raising pigs that we were buying pigs from. And we were in that neighborhood, and we decided to go to the 4th of July rodeo in St. Paul. And I really didn't grow up around rodeo at all. But in 1968, 1969, God knows who I probably had a chance to watch in St. Paul on the 4th of July. Larry Mahan. Mel Lambert was the announcer there. And I don't even know if you remember Mel or not. But he was from Salem, Oregon, did the NFR a couple of times back in the 70s, had this really smooth kind of buttery voice. And the thing I remember is not so much what happened in the arena or who I saw, but I remember listening to this guy and listening to him talk about all these people and thinking, this guy's everybody's friend. He knows all these people. He knows the Native Americans that are in the wild horse race. He's friends with everybody. And to this day, I think that's kind of stuck with me a little bit. That idea that this man that I listened to, who was literally the very first rodeo announcer I ever listened to in my life, knew everybody. And I came away from that thinking that was the job, to explain the event, to explain the sport, and to try to know everybody, try to sound like you're everybody's friend.
You said that you didn't grow up in the industry, that you kind of got drawn into it a little bit later. You said, what was it what were you doing before you decided to become an announcer, and what drew you into being an announcer in the Western industry?
When I was a kid, when I was growing up, way back in the dark ages when there were 3 channels on television and all that kind of stuff, I grew up on a family potato farm in a little town called Malin, Oregon, down in Klamath County. And I learned early on that there are several things I am incapable of doing. Basically, anything that involves building something. I remember once do you remember old straw choppers back in the day? Way back when? You don't probably, but They were basically a metal box with a couple of blades underneath them and exposed belts on the top. I once set a stubble field on fire. I let a bunch of wet straw build up on top of the straw chopper, and these belts built up a bunch of friction. And the next thing I know, the entire 40 acres was on fire, and the neighbors were flying with every form of water that they could get to keep the fire from jumping over the road into their place. And we got it all contained. But it was at that moment that I realized I really was a terrible farmer. The one thing I always had was a voice. The one thing God blessed me with was a voice and the ability to tell stories. I was in radio.
Okay.
When I was announced at all those high school rodeos that you were competing in, I forget exactly when. I was either living in McMinnville, Oregon, because that's where I graduated from college, Linfield College in McMinnville, Oregon, doing play-by-play for football and basketball games, or I was living in Pendleton. I forget which. I think when you were rodeoing in high school, I was still in McMinnville. And to this day, I continue to love radio. When I got involved in the National Finals Rodeo, the thing that eventually led me to the Cowboy Channel was in 2008, after working for another gentleman for a couple of years, I was given the opportunity to produce a national radio broadcast in the National Finals Rodeo on an old website called ProRodeoLive.com. And did that for 12 years. And when Rural Media Group started the rural radio that was put on the air in 2013, I remember going to Salinas and doing the very first national radio broadcast of a rodeo on Sirius XM.
Sirius XM.
From the championship round in Salinas. And so that's kind of how that all morphed. But my background is in radio, and my background is before I ever got into rodeo, and I'd love to do this again someday, doing play-by-play.
Yeah.
Football and basketball. And I'd love to. I don't know what's in the plans of the new owners of the Cowboy Channel. I'd love to have a chance to get back on the radio during the NFR if it ever materialized.
Yeah.
There's some. It's kind of a unique deal to describe a team roping run on the radio.
Yeah, it is.
It's people are like, how do you paint a picture of a guy catching a pass and outrunning the rest of the field and running into the end zone for a touchdown, or a guy pulling up for a 30-point three-pointer at the buzzer and swish through the net and he hits a game-winning three? How do you paint the picture of Charlie Crawford backed into the head side, reaching out, slick horn catch, dally up, left turn? Here comes Logan Medlin on the heel side for two, and you were just 4 flat or 3-9 or 3-8.
Yeah, I'm trying to explain that play-by-play.
And doing that in that quick a time period and painting the picture, it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an awful lot of fun when you do it.
Well, I remember when you and I got to do it during the NFR.
Yeah, you came up with this one year.
You invited me up there for a couple rounds, and it was fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
First day was, obviously I was taking notes and trying to research the steers, and I enjoyed it. It was almost like being a reporter in a way, being ahead of the competition and knowing what everyone has, what they're riding. And then by the third, I was 2 or 3 times. I can't remember.
I think you came up 3 days, if I remember right.
And it was fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I seen what you're saying on trying to articulate, and what I've always been trying to learn how to do with my clinics is when I've listened to, say, Clinton Anderson or certain people when they announce or commentate and things like that, when you can actually see what they're saying, man, that's some wild communication.
Yeah.
And where yours got such an ability to where because we used to listen to when I was rodeoing there for a few decades, that was all we got. We didn't have the Cowboy Channel.
Right.
It was listening to it on XM radio, and you did such a good job of being able to where when we would listen to you commentate the rodeo, we could see what was actually going on by how you were explaining it over the radio. That's
when I learned how to do play-by-play, there was a gentleman named Bill Garrard, whose name will not mean anything to probably any of your listeners, but he was the general manager and one of the most well-respected play-by-play guys on small market radio in Oregon. He ran KAGO in Klamath Falls, where I got my very first radio job. And he took me with him to do color commentary at a bunch of football and basketball broadcasts for Klamath Union High School. Go Pelicans. Really a terrible nickname, but that's a different story. Anyway, he described it to me really simply. He said, everybody who's listening to you would be at that game if they could be there. You have to be their eyes. You have to paint the picture so they can see it. And that always stuck with me. You remember Bill Schonley did play-by-play for the Portland Trailblazers for years and years and years. He told me something similar. You're painting the picture. And this was, at that time, sports was not on TV at the level it is now. Radio was a much bigger deal. I was my Pro Rodeo Live website, and that morphed into rural radio. We were before the Wrangler Network. The Wrangler Network came along. People started being able to see more and more television, and then somewhere in there, RFD TV got involved, and RFD TV morphed into the Cowboy Channel. I still think there's a place for radio. I really do. I drive a lot. I travel a lot. I listen to a lot of football and basketball and baseball games on the radio when I'm traveling. And I still marvel at the guys that can just paint that picture, create the the greatest baseball broadcasters used to be able to, the Vin Scullys of the world could create an image in your mind where you could literally smell the fresh cut grass and see the dust as the ball bounced across the, dirt between second and third base. And, those kinds of things to me have always just, I still get goosebumps just thinking about it, because the ability to paint those kind of pictures to me was always just magical.
Well, and your announcing has also evolved a lot too from when we were in high school rodeos.
I hope so.
Then you start, well, what I mean by that is like where your locations have been. You came from the Oregon State High School Rodeo Association, and then now you're starting to get pro rodeo gigs, between some of the rodeos that I remember seeing you at throughout my whole career and things like that. And then now being able to announce the National Finals breakaway roping.
Yep.
Alongside Bob Tallman.
That was a dream come true.
How about that one?
I just had the chance to work the Eastern Oregon Livestock Show in Union, Oregon for the 30th time. It was my very first PRCA rodeo. I replaced a gentleman named Bob Chambers. Bob had been there for 37 years or something ridiculous like that. They've had two announcers in almost 70 years at that rodeo. But that was 30 years ago. That was my first PRCA rodeo. And I knew Bob actually through high school rodeo. Remember, Bob lived in Baker City, Oregon before he moved to Texas. And he and his wife, Kristen, and their daughter, Nicole, were all Kristen was the high school rodeo president there for a while. Nicole was the pole bending champion, I think, 1 or 2 years. And they all live in Texas now. But that's how I got to know the Tallmans. And when I first joined the PRCA, and I told Bob this before the breakaway finals this year, I had a dream that I think probably there are 125, 150 announcers in the PRCA. I had a dream that 100 of us have had, that someday I would get to be next to that man in Las Vegas announcing the national finals. And that came true last December at the South Point, when I had a chance to talk about people like your wife, Jackie, and the 14 best breakaway ropers in the world announcing the national finals breakaway. And it was a kick. It was a lot of fun.
When did you get your card? When did you get your PRCA card?
1993.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then 2024.
Yeah. And the folks in Union said, are you going to, I'm 65 years old. A lot of people think you ought to start retiring. And Union asked me, what do you want to do? I said, I want to announce this thing for another 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't feel like any of my rodeo committees that are listening to this, I don't feel like I've lost anything. I don't feel like I'm 65. I don't know what I'd do if I retired.
Well, your knowledge, in my opinion, has been what's been one of your strengths that really popped out to me, because you stay in the game in so many different ways, interviewing with your podcast, staying up with what's going on with the guys, knowing what's going on in the industry. But, even Jackie, she knows her career fairly well. And when you were announcing the National Finals breakaway rodeo, I think 8th or 9th round, she was roping, and you had mentioned that she was maybe 20,000 or something around there along the lines of being the first female WPRA breakaway roper to get close to $1 million.
Yeah, the first woman, Jackie is going into the breakaway finals, and I forget how much she won when we were in Las Vegas, but going into the breakaway finals, because I researched this because I had her on my podcast, she had won a little over $958,000 in the WPRA with her rope. Not just breakaway, but team roping calves, everything that Jackie's done through her career. And I confirmed this with Ann Bleicher with the WPRA. She is probably sometime in the next year going to become the very first $1 million roper in the WPRA. Now, in Jackie's case, that means that she will actually be, I think, probably approaching, she's over $1.5 million for sure, because she won that little $600,000 check at the American a couple of years ago. She's had some big wins at in the WCRA and some other events that don't count in the WPRA standings. So she's won well over $1 million already. And she's actually probably creeping up on $2 million in her career with her rope. But just in the WPRA, she's at, I'm going to say $975,000, $980,000 now.
And I think for a lot of people to understand what that means for her, just strictly WPRA earnings, is, I would say, since her junior high school, college, and then her career after college, WPRA was just, there was only a few events here and there.
Yeah.
We're talking like she wins the first round of the calf rope and we're talking $153.
Exactly.
These are things where what Breakaway's done in this evolution in the last 10 to 5 years, just in 5 years is almost recognizable. 10 years, you don't even recognize it. But what she was winning was just little scraps at a time. And for her to get to $1 million at 42 and the route that she had to do to take it was a lot different than Riley Webb's first $1 million at, is he 21 yet?
Yeah.
Way different. But it's still pretty cool to touch that topic because she didn't even realize it.
She's going to be the first breakaway. She's going to be the first roper, not just breakaway, but the first roper in the WPRA. And what is the story she tells? She went to a jackpot someplace and won $6,000 in a trailer and thought she had it made. And that was, you guys weren't married yet, I don't think. That was 25, 30 years ago. And now here she is creeping in on $1 million. That money's going to, just like every other money, all of the money in professional rodeo, that money's going to continue to grow. The interesting thing will be, Jackie's going, in 2025, Jackie will become the first $1 million WPRA roper. Kelsey Domer's not too far behind her. How quick will Josie Connor get there? We all recognize that Trevor Brazil has won over $7 million in the PRCA. If you include his earnings at the timed event championships, things like that, Trevor's probably over $8 million by the time you get done. How quick will Stetson Wright get there?
Yeah.
How quick will Riley Webb get there? How quick will Shad Mayfield get there? What will the new mark be? 10 million?
And that's what I think is for the way you explained it, is the fact that, Roy Cooper was the first $1 million, one of the first ones, right? And I remember him being on the cover of the magazine, and that was a huge, huge milestone at that point in time. And then look how, like I say, since then, the money's gotten better and gotten better and gotten better. And so it's not, not as far. Now Riley Webb barely shaves. Yeah. I'm not even sure if he's legal to buy a beer.
I think he's 21 now, but it's
close.
It's a recent occurrence. How's that sound?
So and to me, that speaks volumes for the industry of how much it is at least growing in that perspective.
And the interesting thing about it, you talk about perspective. I wish I had saved this one soundbite from an interview I did several years ago with Trevor Brazil. And we were talking about money. And he openly said, look, I'm not making a baseball player's salary. I'm not making whatever these guys make that are, using a bat and a ball and a stick and all that. But I get to get up every day and get on a good horse. And I get to raise my kids in this lifestyle that I love. And that's worth a lot more than just money. And the way that Trevor explained it, he explained it so much better than I just did. It was, I literally wish if I'd saved anything out of any interview I'd ever done, it would have been that one comment. The way that he explained it, you think about it, Trevor Brazil's made $7 million over how many years? How much is Patrick Mahomes going to make this year?
Right.
But Trevor talking about the lifestyle and the ability that he has to to do the things that he does with his horses. And Trevor now has morphed into where he's involved in the futurity business, and I know he's not slowing down, and
No.
he certainly has just found a different way to go about all of this. But that explanation of why this sport was so important to him, to me, is something that we always need to remember.
I think I've actually heard Dale Brisby on a podcast before, and I like the way he explained it really well. He said, in the Western industry, you're going to work a lot harder for less.
Yeah.
And I think that's where so many people this not a get rich quick. This is a slower industry, but we're outside. A lot of us are doing what we love. And so there's a lot of gratification in that. There's a lot of self-worth in that. And one of the things too, is we've talked about evolving and it's such a fine line in this industry of the tradition that made rodeo great has to be kept in some form or another to keep it good, but to also evolve and try to get the money added to where these guys are getting paid, where they can buy their own place and make the sport in the direction it could go without losing that tradition. It's a tricky balance, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I remember when I first got into the PRCA and a long, long time ago, and a lot of guys would tell me, and I don't know if you ever felt this way in your 10 trips to the NFR, but there was a time when you literally rodeoed all year to break even or not lose a whole lot, because you knew if you could get to the NFR,
that's where you make your money.
You could make your money. And now, guys are starting to make $400,000 or $500,000 a year and not win a world title.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden now you're starting to see, and there are other events. There's a team series event going on right across the street from us right now, where we're talking in Fort Worth. I drove in here with my window rolled down, talking to Shane Hanchey and Fred Whitfield. They're headed over to Cowtown Coliseum to, and that's a whole nother avenue to make a pretty nice little chunk of change. I guess my point being, it's really gratifying to see more and more rodeo athletes able to not just get by and try to break even so they can get to the finals, but be able to actually make money during the regular season, get to the finals, and really make a nice, and make the kind of a living that you make when you consider the fact that a rodeo cowboy or a rodeo cowgirl is entertaining fans in anywhere from 50 to 100 venues a year. The football player is getting paid 4 times as much as we do or more, and entertaining fans in 16 to 18 venues a year, or 20 if they make it to the Super Bowl. Rodeo athletes entertain a lot of fans in a lot of different places all over the world. I never thought of it in these terms, but it's just nice. And you talk about the tradition, and you talk about maintaining all of that. That is the eternal struggle, I think, in professional rodeo, is how do we maintain our history? How do we maintain our heritage? How do we not depart from the roots of ranching and agriculture and cattle and Casey Tibbs and Larry Mahan and those people who helped to set this sport on the path, while at the same time appealing to the TikTok generation?
Yeah.
We've got we live in a life now where people are walking up and down the street staring at their phone more than they are staring at each other, and people have an attention span of about 30 seconds. So what are we going to do in the 2 hours and 15 minutes that we have? The one thing that's changed, Charlie, when I first started announcing, people didn't really worry about, okay, if it took 4 hours for us to have our rodeo, no big deal. I cannot tell you how many times we get done with an event now, and the people who are producing the event, they don't come up and say, boy, great job, Steve. Nice job telling stories about Charlie Crawford and his history roping. They come up and say, man, we got it done. 2 hours and 12 minutes. That everybody is looking at the clock now to make sure that we don't go too long, because people have figured out there are a few exceptions. The Pendleton Roundup is never going to be run on a clock, but most of the events that I go to anymore, people are watching and they want to make sure we're 2 hours and 15 minutes. I remember years when the NFR was done in an hour and 45. So that's the eternal struggle, is how do you maintain the history? How do you maintain the heritage? And how do you continue to appeal to the modern generation? Somehow or another, it's working. And the reason I say that is there are rodeos all over the country every year that are setting attendance records. I did an interview on Western Sports Roundup yesterday with Paul Anders, who's the president and CEO of the National Western in Denver. And he said their sales are up for Denver this year with, as we're recording this, the rodeo about ready to start this weekend. They're probably going to set some attendance records in Denver this year.
I was talking to some of my sponsors and some of the conversations I've had with some other guys that had some businesses out there in Vegas, and they said this year it was wild, record-setting sales. Yeah. And what this economy is right now, where people are, struggling to pay gas and food and rent, with everything which has gone up, insurance, with inflation, and to be able to have record sales, that it's wild to me.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on what's creating that? Because I know the Cowboy Channel has had a big part in that, of educating fans and gaining some fans as well. But, there's Yellowstone and there's a lot of different things. But what is your perspective?
There's the Yellowstone effect. I think the Cowboy Channel has contributed. I think the Cowboy Channel has shone a light on the world of professional rodeo. I really think rodeo has done its part. And this is going to sound a little political, and I don't mean it to. I just simply feel like it's a fact that over the last few years, the country has moved in a direction, and we saw this in the last election, the country is coming back in a different direction, and the country is hungry in a lot of different places for the product that we are selling. Not just the bulls and the bucking horses, not just the ropers and the barrel racers, but the event that embraces patriotism, that starts with a prayer, where people are unabashedly and unashamedly willing to express their faith in the Lord and Savior above. I think that people are hungry for the product we are selling. There is a level of patriotism, of God and country in the rodeo industry that, you never had a controversy with rodeo athletes kneeling during the national anthem.
No, there was always kind of an unspoken rule that if you're kneeling, you better be crippled, because if you're not, you're going to be.
Yeah, exactly. and I just
but there
feel
there never was an issue.
Yeah, and I just really feel like we're offering a product that people can gravitate to, that has a feel of Americana, and a feel of patriotism, and a feel of what a lot of Americans have been hungry for and looking for.
And for us, in my opinion, for us, it's more. For us, it didn't seem like that was that long ago.
Yeah.
I remember every time my dad, the way we were raised was, and I was raised Democrat. My family was through the unions. My dad worked for the power company,
sure.
And my stepmom, she worked in a chicken plant and then a battery plant, So back then, a lot of them were fighting for good working conditions.
Yeah.
A way different situation for kind of what it is now. But, it was proud to be an American. We had songs by Lee Greenwood that sang about it. We had, my dad was, if you didn't buy American, we ain't buying it. Mm-hmm. There was so much pride in America. So like I said, we remembered that. And then things got easy. And then, however, the political the turmoil kind of turned, but it does feel like we woke up.
We've been through. Again, this is going to sound pretty political, and I don't mean it to. It's just it's honestly my perspective is, and if I'm wrong, people will tell me. We have been through 15, 20 years of getting a little bit lazy because our biggest first world problem is, oh my God, my phone's not working.
Or where is it?
Yeah, exactly. And now all of a sudden, over the last few years, we've had to struggle to pay bills. We've had to struggle to buy gas. We've had to deal with those kinds of things. And we still live in President Trump says, make America great again. We still live in the greatest nation on the planet. I firmly believe that. But we have seen a lot of Americans kind of get reminded that this all ain't easy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now here we are. The president says we're going to experience an American Renaissance. The golden age is coming.
He is on fire.
And he's on fire. And
the mainstream media is having a hard time just keeping up.
Yeah, exactly.
We're looking to buy Greenland. We want to make Canada the 51st state. We're gonna get back the canal. We're gonna go fishing at the Gulf of America. I mean, they can't even keep up with all this stuff.
You know what's funny about Trump is I really think a lot of that is, he wrote a book once upon a time called The Art of the Deal. He hosted a TV show for a lot of years that was one of the most popular television shows in the country, The Apprentice. He's doing a lot of negotiating in public right now. And are we going to end up owning Greenland? I don't know. Are we going to end up having a really good deal with Greenland that helps? Are we going to end up with Canada as the 51st state? Probably not. But he's right. If you've rodeoed up in Canada, if you think of the potential powerhouse that a partnership of the United States and Canada could become,
absolutely, with
all of the natural resources in Canada,
and you think of the natural resources in Greenland as well, but then you think of Russia and China, and all of a sudden America got bigger.
Yeah,
they'd be crapping.
Yep.
That strength that could be presented, but then you think about all the Canadian ropers or the rodeoing up there in Canada. Now all of a sudden the dollar would be the same.
Yeah.
I bet there's a lot of rodeo guys that are welcoming that idea.
Yeah.
Not having to worry about the border and
all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's and to bring this back around to, the discussion about rodeo, I really believe that I see it in the crowds that I watch when I'm announcing. They're listening to me. I'm watching them because I want to know when I'm announcing, what are they responding to? What are they bored by? Every rodeo committee should do this. Every rodeo committee should have one person who is assigned to just simply watch the crowd. And if there's a moment where everybody in the audience gets up to go buy a beer or go to the bathroom and they're not focused on the arena, you need to change that moment in your production. And I watch the crowd, and I really feel like audiences are just buying the product that we're selling. Forgive me for being redundant, but I think that we've tapped into something, or maybe we had it all along and people are rediscovering it now is a better way to put it. We've tapped into something where people really are able to feel the love of country and God and the patriotism that we exude through the rodeo business.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's one thing that the event that you help us put on as well as a contestant is
so much fun.
Well, it's very important, I think, for contestants that want to throw a lot of mud. Go ahead and try putting one on.
Yeah.
What I enjoy is the creativity of it, but I can't tell you how many times I went up there and above the buck and shoots and did exactly what you're talking about. Which ones are they glued to? Which ones are they leaving? Which ones are they, going to the bathroom and coming back on? That is a very strategic, because that, Susan Canode, she helps us a lot as well. Right. And one of the things that she's reminded me of a lot too is that remember that we are in the entertainment business.
Yep.
So it is important to be able to look and see how this creates entertainment to keep people that want to keep coming back to it.
There's a lady at the rodeo in Santa Maria, California named Tina Tanasha, and she's the one that taught me that idea that you really need to be paying attention to what your crowd's paying attention to. And Tina and her guidance, along with the people around her and first Cotton Rosser and then Reno Rosser with Flying U, they have really kind of built something that's pretty impressive, I think, in Santa Maria. And that's the way that they approach it. They watch the crowd. You learned something after you got done competing, putting on the American Heroes Celebration and the Liberty and Loyalty Foundation event that you put on every year in November, this great team roping, which, by the way, if you get a chance to next year, come watch this roping, because you're not just going to watch a roping, you're going to watch a spectacle that celebrates the country. And Charlie Crawford and all of the people around him do such a fabulous job putting it on. It's an honor to be a small part of it, Charlie. It really is.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you bring such a good presence to it as well, and so we appreciate having you.
I get a kick out of announcing with Farron Lucero. He is a team roping encyclopedia.
Mm-hmm. I figured you two would love it because, yes, exactly right. He knows so much on team roping where you know so much stuff. I thought, man, that'd be cool to watch.
Yeah, but the one thing that you learned, and maybe I honest to God think there's no way to put this rule in. It would never become a reality. every single one of us who is competing in rodeo, who is involved in, whether we're an announcer or both, we should all have to put one or two on in our lives before we get our PRCA card. I put on 3 rodeos back in Western Oregon long, long ago, and they were all a dismal failure. And I learned that I really am terrible at production, but I also at least learned something about what it takes behind the scenes to make all these things happen.
The rodeo committees are the unsung heroes.
They are.
And they really are what makes rodeo great.
They are.
Because without them, there isn't. It's not like PRCA puts on rodeos. These committees are the people that put on. They're the people familiar with the community. They go out and hustle and go get the money. There's so much unsung heroism that they bring that makes this industry great.
Yeah. And it's I love the fact that so many events are able to increase their prize money now and make these events more profitable for the contestants. But I want the contestants to always remember that there is somebody in that community, small, medium, or large size, that is going to the local beer distributor, the local appliance store, the local car dealership, the local dairy farm, and asking those people to put up their hard-earned money to become sponsors of the event, who make it possible for rodeo contestants to show up and rope at a $10 or $12, $15 or $20,000 added rodeo. Mm-hmm. And instead of leaving town with a $2,000 or $3,000 check, maybe leaving town with a $5,000 or $6,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 check. But there's a progression there. That money has to come from somewhere over here before it gets into the roper or the bareback rider or the bronc rider or the bull rider's bank account. Mm-hmm. And it's starting with somebody on a local rodeo committee going to some group of people in the local business community and saying, hey, we want to do this. We want to bring all this into town. Here's what's in it for you. Can you write me a check for $10,000? Or $5,000. For some people, that's not a big check. For some people, it's ginormous.
Yeah.
For some people, $2,000 is all. I've got a rodeo in Othello, Washington that I announced, and they, for years and years and years, their sponsorship program has been a whole bunch of local farmers and a whole bunch of local business people. They don't maybe give a whole bunch between them, but what they give accumulated adds up to a pretty good sized chunk of added money in whatever event they're sponsoring. And that rodeo has grown in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. It's a pretty good sized Columbia River Circuit rodeo now.
Yeah.
And I understand contestants want to go to where they can get paid the most, but I also always want contestants to remember, where does the money start? Where does it come from? How does it get to where it's available for you to compete at? And if contestants will remember that, then I hope the contestants will remember that the people who put on the rodeo that is in the small rodeo category work just as hard, if not harder, than the people who put on the events in the medium and large rodeo size rodeo category. Yeah, that's a good
perspective, because to try to come up with money in some of them smaller towns,
yeah,
you're exactly right. And gratitude is always something that is always something that should be highly promoted in everything that you're doing. As a contestant, you're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And, I think what has been difficult to see is, or I think what's difficult for a lot of people to try to see and understand is, as we're talking about the tradition of the industry and how to make it to where that there's guys making more money so they can buy their own places. And, that's where you're starting. And to me, that's to see rodeos that I went to when I retired that used to add $3,000-$4,000. Now they're adding 10.
Yeah.
And this is in my event, the team roping. They were adding 4,000 aside, and then now a lot of them are adding 10.
Yeah.
And they're smaller during a recession. Like, that is so wild how there's a lot of them that are getting better. It's
and team ropers have always been, tell me if I'm wrong, team ropers have always been a little bit of an interesting spot because, number one, there's always a tendency to split the money up. Mm-hmm. Somehow or another in the team roping, it tended to, there are rodeo committees out there, and God bless them. I know they're doing what they think they have to be able to attract, contestants with as much money as they can put together. But there are a lot of situations where maybe the riding event money would go up first and then the timed event money would go up later. And in the team roping, you're hoping they didn't split the heading and the heeling. I don't even know if they can do that anymore. I think there may be some rules about that now.
They were still there when I was there. And, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this. But as far as rodeo goes, the way I've looked at it is the rough stock events and the timed events need each other.
Yeah.
Because the rough stock needs the timed events. The timed events is where the membership is.
Yep.
When you're looking at the amount of membership team roping brings, steer wrestling, calf roping, bareback riders, is there 100 bareback riders in the PRCA? There
are more now. The numbers of bareback riders have come up over the last few years. Columbia River Circuit finals this year. And the Columbia River Circuit's been through kind of an interesting metamorphosis in bareback riding because remember for a while there, we had Bobby Moe, we had Jason Havens, we had Brian Bain, we had Ryan Gray, we had Stephen Peebles. We had all these guys showing up at the circuit finals at the same time. It was the greatest set of bareback riders going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then those guys moved on to other things or, started to get a little older and quit. And a couple of years there, we only had 7 or 8 guys. This year we had 12, but all of them were like 22 years of age and under. Young guys who still are perfecting their craft, but they're evidence of the fact that the numbers are coming up. And the bareback riding numbers have been increasing, which is good. I'm glad to see that. There was a while there where, you'd see 10 or 12 an event in every event, and you'd see 5 in the bareback riding.
And that's where I think that they were adding so much more money in the rough stock events was to try to attract more of the people.
Yep.
So that the money was getting offset. And that's where it's an interesting, balance because I always speak on both sides is because the rough stock needs us for the organization to keep the doors open. We need the rough stock because that's what puts butts in seats.
Right.
So it's a very, I think when guys look at it on both sides, it's a good way to understand we need each other to promote this entertainment.
The whole is what's the old saying? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, or something like that. It's a synergistic relationship, Charlie. I'm using a lot of multisyllabic words I may or may not understand. Bob Feist, if you ever get a chance to interview him, and maybe you have, and I know you know Bob from all of the great things he's done in the roping business through the years. Bob has a great perspective on the value of timed event contestants in the world of professional rodeo. Who are the major sponsors in the rodeo world? They are truck companies. They are rope companies. They are, there are Capri campers. Obviously, you see a bunch of riding event contestants driving, and some timed event contestants running around with a Capri camper. But if you think about trucks, trailers, saddles, ropes, a lot of the major sponsors and a lot of the major partners that we have in professional rodeo are industries that cater more to the timed event side. And the timed event side supports them by buying trucks, trailers, ropes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're right. We need each other. There is no reason for... I love it when I'm watching the NFR and I see Shane Hanchey behind the buck and chutes pulling Kai Hamilton's rope during the bull riding. Things like that. I love it when we all have a
I used to do it with
we're all
Bobby
working
Moe.
with each other. Yeah.
I used to do it with Bobby Moe. I'd go behind there and because he team roped and we buddied a lot of times, and then I'd help him in the bareback ride, and him and Jason and a lot of the Pride guys that they had, and it was fun. I got to see Spring Fling. I tore off a piece of her mane and kept it. I was a huge fan of her. She was phenomenal.
She was my
athlete.
Favorite horse of all time. Still is.
I know as you're saying, it's fun to go back and forth as a contestant for sure.
Well, and that's part of the thrill of professional rodeo. And it's interesting because you talk about, okay, maybe the riding events are the guys that sell more of the tickets. What's interesting is Joe Beaver and I talked about this before the NFR this year. Can you think of an event where I am so rambling all over the place, Charlie? I'm sorry. You're probably having trouble keeping me on
I love it. I love picking your brain.
Can you think of an event where there have been more great head-to-head rivalries than the tie-down roping at the NFR?
Yeah,
Whether it's
roping was phenomenal.
Roy Cooper, and then
Joe Beaver.
Joe B. alongside Fred Whitfield, alongside Cody Ohl. That night in, what was it, 1997, the 8th or 9th go-round when, how did it go? Blair Burke was 7 flat, Fred was 6'9", and Jeff Chadwick jumped out, or Jeff Chapman, I should say, jumped out, was 6'8". At that time, that was the NFR record.
That was the loudest thing I've ever heard.
It was unbelievable. And that, I really, there are a lot of people that will tell you that night kind of turned the tie-down roping into the event where people weren't getting up and going to the bathroom anymore.
Absolutely.
And through the years, and we've got it now. Shad Mayfield, Haven Medjid, Riley Webb.
Absolutely.
How many years is that rivalry going to be? It's going to be around for a while. Mm-hmm. And please do not think I'm disrespecting the other 12 guys that made it to the NFR, because they're all great ropers.
But there's a level you can.
But
see
there's a level, and you can see it with what they are, with what they've accomplished and where they are right now in their careers. And from a media standpoint, those matchups and those rivalries, it makes it easy for us on television and us on the Cowboy Channel to have something to sell right there, because you get the full screen on TV of Haven and Shad, and what they've gotten done, or Riley and Haven, or Riley and Shad, whomever, and the money they've won and what they've done in the go rounds. And Haven was 6'4" in go round number 7 in 2023, and Shad would have broken that record, but his calf got up with that 6.1. There are as many good rivalries in that event of calf roping as there are any event that we have in professional rodeo, year after year after year after year. I think
I do too. It has. It's been a fan favorite and very electric. And then, I thought was amazing too, watching this year, it was the barrel racing.
Yeah. It was as loud inside the Thomas and Mack.
Those two horses. Yeah. And then the drama of Sister being out on the 10th round. And then Jackie said that the girl that won it, what was it? I'm going brain dead.
Cassie
Mowry went to 27 rodeos.
She went to 27 rodeos. Cassie's story,
smokes.
I don't know if all of the 17,000 people in the audience every night during the National Finals Rodeo this year had a full understanding of Cassie Mowry's 2025.
Jackie touched on it a little bit. I would love to talk about it. It's phenomenal.
It was a story of heartache and tragedy. Her fiance, Michael, who is, if you look at when the Horse of the Year awards came out, and Jarvis, Cassie's barrel horse, was named the Horse of the Year in the WPRA, he is listed as, his registered owner is the late, because Michael died during the summer. Had a tractor roll over on him. And Cassie only was able to go to 27 rodeos. You have to go to a minimum of 25.
Which I think the minimum that's the silliest rule ever.
I think it is too.
Because if you can make it, you can make it.
Yep.
To me, if you're counting money, it should be a minimum.
Yep.
A maximum for sure.
Yep.
But
I want to get back to that in just a minute, but I don't know how many people knew Cassie's story. Perhaps as the rodeo went along, more and more people got to understand what an incredible thing she was doing and how she managed to hold it together night after night after night.
Yeah. Because
she was there with Jarvis, showcasing her talent, more importantly to her, showcasing her horse's talent. Mm-hmm. It brings a tear to my eye just thinking about this. And in tribute to Michael.
Yeah.
And what she was able to do, winning 5 straight go-rounds, placing in every round where she made a clean run but one. I'm doing this from memory, so if I miss it a little bit there, winning the money that she won. And night after night, Haley starts off winning 4 straight. Cassie jumps out, wins 5 in a row.
You talk about rivalry.
Yeah, you talk about rivalry.
Yeah.
There's a potential rivalry for the ages right there.
And Jackie was talking about almost, and helped me to talk about her year a little bit. Not only the loss, but then just how she made the finals. Because I think Jackie said she was explaining that maybe Salt Lake, she was going home or something, because maybe the horse she was riding got hurt or something. So I think she cracked Jarvis out.
Yep. And
midway through the year.
And I forget
didn't know
that
if he was going to.
I'm not comfortable going into all that either, because I forget exactly how the story went. But the bottom line is that she had to overcome the death of her fiance, going to 27 rodeos, holding it together night after night after night. And if you remember, she was in tears on the stage when Katie Lucas interviewed her after they announced her as world champion. And I just think Cassie Mowry proved herself to be one of the greatest horsewomen of all time. We already know that she is. She has trained. I was talking to Kendra Santos, and she reminded me of a statistic. You want to talk about somebody who knows her stuff. Kendra was reminding me of a story that she did with Cassie. Cassie Mowry doesn't just win money in rodeos. The money she's won in rodeo is a small part of her career in the barrel racing business. She's trained $7 or $8 million worth of winners.
Yeah, the horse
in the futurity world, in the Derby world, in the Pink Buckle futurity world, in the Ruby Buckle futurity world, and all of those different events. She has in a lot of years had a decision to make after she's jumped out and done well at Fort Worth and San Antonio and places like that. Okay,
that's what I understood. She did good at those, and then went through the summer, maybe the horse she was riding, but then Jarvis had to step in, and then just found out she had one of the best ones out there. Yeah. And then still going to her fraternities, I'm sure, and probably doing all that as well, correct?
She's got that was the magic of the program that Cassie and Michael had put together, is together they train futurity horses. And I don't know all the specifics of all of that as much as I should. You know, my family's in the barrel horse business, and but her story this year is it's a life tragedy that turned into a Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
At the end of it, because of how she handled herself, everything that she did during the national finals, the incredible performance she put together, that boxing match between her and Haley, and the way the crowd reacted. The two loudest moments of every performance of the national finals rodeo this year were when a Palomino mare named Sister and Haley Kinsel rode into the arena, and when Jarvis and Cassie Mowry rode into the arena. Every other event, you did great. Loved watching you. The two loudest moments every night, the biggest, oh my God, the air just got let out of the balloon, was whichever round it was when Haley hit those two barrels. But the fans in Las Vegas were very much into what those two were doing.
Yeah, and just also too, for people to understand, is how well Cassidy is known for training.
Yeah,
jockey. She's an amazing horsewoman, and I think that she's been solidified, I believe, from everything I've heard so much in the futurity world. I think it was great. The industry of the Cowboy Channel and the NFR was a great showcase for the whole world to find out.
She very probably, if she's not in the top 5, she certainly is in the top 5. She might be the greatest futurity trainer, greatest barrel horse trainer going right now.
Yeah.
And I don't say that lightly, because I know a bunch of great barrel horse trainers, and she is absolutely one of the best of all time.
That's awesome. You talked about being able to announce the breakaway finals with Bob Tallman, and you talked about that was a kind of a dream. You said since 2003?
Oh yeah, more than that, Charlie. Because I joined the PRCA 30 years ago. It was great.
What'd you learn too?
I learned a lot. Bob is one of the most interesting people in the world, because any conversation I've ever had with Bob starts here and ends here, but you can do the River Nile getting from point A to point B. He always gets where he wants to go. But that man's ability, that if you talk to guys like Joe B, and you roped a bunch of steers at a bunch of NFRs with Bob Tallman behind a microphone, and so you can probably share this as well. Part of what made Joe Beaver will tell you, part of what made the NFR so special to him every year was that voice, telling that story, telling the stories the way only Bob can. And you know, I reinforced the fact that I think he's the GOAT. I think he's the greatest of all time. And there have been some legends in the rodeo announcing business. Whether you talk about Randy Corley or Hadley Barrett, or you go all the way back to the olden days of the Cy Talons and those guys. I think, Bob's got the resume, and he's had the impact on the industry for 50 years that he has. You think of where he's been, Reno, Fort Worth, all of those events that he's been at for 35, 40 plus years. What did I learn announcing the breakaway finals with him? I reminded myself that this guy is something special, that he doesn't necessarily need all of the numbers and all of the statistics to still be able to tell you a story that will get your attention and keep it. I remember Haley Williams, when Haley ropes good, she gives a little wave to the crowd. Every night, every go-round after the first two, because Haley got off to a rough start. Come on, Haley, give me that wave. And there'd be that big smile and that wave. And you and Jackie both are unique in that you've both won Rodeo Houston in two different events. Bob's been a fixture at Houston for how long? A lot of rodeo contestants, a lot of rodeo athletes, a lot of the best that have ever been, and even a bunch of ropers and riders who maybe aren't the best that have ever been. Guys who are, happy to make their circuit finals. And all of you, I think, can tell stories about that moment when Bob Tallman made the hair stand up on the back of your neck. When he said something and his intonation and that voice and that unique sound and that once in a career style jumped out and grabbed you. And made you feel kind of cool.
I thought that was really cool for the breakaway ropers. We've talked about your passion in the barrels. You guys your family's in the
right, very
knowledgeable in the barrel horse industry, and mine has now become very knowledgeable in the breakaway industry. With being married with who I'm married to.
I hope you don't ever decide to unretire, because you're never going to have another head horse if it's not gone through the breakaway roping first.
Yeah, but I thought it was very special that the breakaway ropers got to have that opportunity where Bob was there.
Where Bob was
to
there.
Hear that voice that we've all heard growing up, that you've looked up to, I've looked up to. I thought it was very special to have that this year in the breakaway as well.
Yeah, it was, and he was excited. That was what was fun about it.
You guys created a very exciting event, because I would say the Tuesday probably half full. But there was a lot of electricity. I sit in the stands because I got Journey with me. There's 3 and Creed who's 7. So they might have to have a bathroom break halfway through the round. And so, as I'm rooting and cheering everyone on, when I would have to do a bathroom break and then someone light one up down there and they'd be 1-8 or 1-9 or whatever, in the bathroom is where you could hear how loud it was, if that made sense, because you almost took it for granted when I was sitting in the stands. And day two, I don't know if maybe it was 3/4. It was
3/4. It was more full than it was day number 1.
The electricity you guys created in that little venue, it was exciting.
There were some great stories that came out of the breakaway finals. Kelsey Domer was if she could have roped her 10th one, she was going to blow away the aggregate record at the national finals breakaway by 10 seconds or something ridiculous like that. And she still ended up, walking out of there with such a well-deserved world title. Jackie's story is always tremendous. The young up-and-comers that did so well. Everybody is a Danielle Lohman fan. Because everybody knows whenever D-Lo backs in the box, you're liable to see something that goes that quick.
And maybe something you've never seen before.
Yeah. There are 2019, before COVID, there were 38 rodeos in the PR or in the WPRA that were produced alongside the PRCA that were sanctioned events. What was the number this year? Over 500?
Yeah.
$5.8 million, something like that, was paid out to breakaway ropers prior to the finals. Prior to the finals, there was that big roping in Arizona, the Kynes Ranch roping that Chris Neal put on.
$1 million breakaway.
It was $1 million breakaway roping. $25,000 to win the average or something like that.
25 to win a round, and I think
$62,000 to win the average.
Almost
Yep.
70.
Yeah,
it was very close to what's going on at Thomas and Mack.
Right. And so all of those opportunities now are just going to, a rising tide lifts all boats, a wise man once said. And as that tide continues to ride, it's just going to become more and more lucrative and more financially profitable and beneficial for breakaway ropers to have their chance. And
what is your perspective of what's holding it back from the Thomas and Mack? That's kind of that is the industry's question.
Yeah.
Everyone, because I think what I feel is so hard, and there's so many conspiracy theories out there, because the conspiracy is basically everyone jumping to conclusions because it's not very transparent.
Yeah.
A 12-year contract or a 10-year contract comes out, within 12 years last year, but there's no word of is breakaway going in there? Is it not? What do you think is some of the reasons that hold it back from being?
Everything that I'm about to say is not based in fact, but pure speculation. The National Finals Rodeo runs on a clock. And
like the clock you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They want people to come enjoy the rodeo, but they also want them back out into Las Vegas. And I don't know if there's hesitation about putting one more event into the NFR or not for that reason. It would, I've been meaning to go back. Actually, somebody else asked me this question and just time one of the go rounds of the breakaway finals.
Jackie has
from the first, and I'll bet you it's not more than 10 minutes to rope 15 calves.
Depending on if there's a calf that lays down,
yeah.
Certain situations, you're correct.
Yeah. The event is still growing and it's still becoming more mainstream. And as it continues to become more and more mainstream, I think eventually that will come. Here is I shouldn't even say this. I already started. Until that moment happens, I hope that the breakaway ropers will all continue to embrace the opportunity they have at the South Point and the work that the people at the South Point do to produce that event, because they work awfully hard to help to create the breakaway finals and the environment and everything that the breakaway ropers have there. Do I think breakaway will someday find itself at the Thomas and Mack? Yeah. Someday I think it will.
I agree with that.
The
someday,
do I know
think
when?
Everyone's, that's the question. For
yeah,
sure, isn't it?
I don't know when.
That's where I think there's nothing out there. It's just not very transparent on what is going on with the contract, because it doesn't seem like there's any talk of it for sure.
Yeah,
of anyone.
I don't. Charlie, I have no insights on that at all. There's a selfish part of me that really likes having the opportunity to go announce it as a separate event every year.
Yeah, for sure.
But not every year, but having had that opportunity in hopes that I will get the opportunity again someday. But all I know, here's what I know about breakaway for sure. Is the event has blossomed. That's no secret. That's not a story we need to do anymore, because it's blossomed. It's become a fixture at so many rodeos. There's a reason behind that. The breakaway ropers, I told Jackie this, I've told several of the ladies this, I told Kelsey Domer this, I did a podcast with her before the NFR. The breakaway ropers have taken care of their event. They don't turn out. As a rodeo announcer, one of the things I do before every performance is go through and find out who showed up. There's never any turnouts in the breakaway. They promised, they went out and they marketed themselves to rodeo committee after rodeo committee after rodeo committee on an individual basis. There's a young lady named Jennifer Casey who's up in the Northwest out of Mesa, Washington. She was given an award by the WPRA a few years ago. Very much a lot of this started in the Columbia River Circuit. All of a sudden we got breakaway roping in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and all of a sudden it's in Pendleton at the Pendleton Roundup, and it's in Moses Lake, and it's in Hermiston, and it's, and a lot of that started up there. But they have taken care of their event. They promised the rodeo committees that they went to and said, give us a shot. something that would be quick, something that would be fast, something that would be easy to understand, something that would be flashy and colorful, and that the fans would enjoy. And they've delivered.
Yeah.
And
another thing that's interesting, I think, for the industry, they say, words talk, numbers scream, is when you look at college, just in our region down here, the Southwest region here in Texas, I think that, because the biggest event has always been the barrel race.
Right.
When it comes to numbers.
Right.
The numbers, that's where the numbers are at, is the amount of barrel racers that always show up. And they said this year that the breakaway actually surpassed.
Really?
For the last 4 years at Portales, there was 265 breakaway ropers and 184 barrel racers.
And that's just in the Southwest and or Southern. There are two regions of college rodeo in Texas, the Southwest and the Southern region. Southwest region. Wow.
And that's the 4th year in a row.
Huh.
They say that, and breakaway in this year was up 49 from last year.
Wow.
So when you look at what the enthusiasm and optimism is in the breakaway, it is growing strong.
Yeah.
And I thought what was interesting is in the college rodeos, they said that just for those two events between barrel racing and breakaway, that they make up for 49 to 50% of the entries.
That I believe.
2 events.
That I believe. Yep.
So, the numbers are definitely there as far as the industry. And so it's interesting to see that when you're talking about it growing, the numbers, because that's what, I've talked to Equibrand a lot, and they always keep track of the junior events, high school events.
Right.
They want to know if it's strong from there, that it's going to be strong at the top.
Right.
And they're always keeping track of those numbers, and to see that that's growing is very, very, it's a good thing for our industry, I think.
Cheyenne added breakaway in 2019. It was a non-sanctioned event. Jordan Joe Hollabaugh won it the first year. And I remember interviewing Tom Hersig, who's the CEO of Cheyenne, about that, and asked him, why did you add breakaway? And his answer was, we've done a lot of research. One of the things that Cheyenne Frontier Days does is they've got their own version of somebody watching the crowd, and they do a lot of research and ask, people, what do you want to see? And the answer they got was more women's events.
Yeah. So
they had a breakaway, and it's been very popular.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very optimistic on the future of it.
Yeah.
So speaking of optimistic, in my opinion, I think it's exciting that, you being a part of the Cowboy Channel, the Teton Ridge just purchased it a few months ago.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
The announcement was made in November, just prior to the National Finals Rodeo.
So what is your take on Teton Ridge? What is your opinion of, or what is your knowledge of, and of how that's going to work with Teton buying Cowboy Channel?
It's interesting because I am still just getting to know a lot of the people from Teton Ridge. In general, here's my thought. And knowing the people who have been behind, for example, the pre-show they've done at the NFR, knowing the people who I worked with here at the Cowboy Channel, who actually are now with Teton Ridge, a gentleman named Joe Lavero, who is one of the best television producers for any sport. He got his start in the Western Way of Life, I think, in the PBR with Randy Bernard, and then came with Randy to RFD TV and to the NFR and to the Cowboy Channel and to the American when all of that first started. I think that, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on the payroll and we're sitting in the Cowboy Channel studio right now, but I really think that I'm optimistic that we are going to see. Are we going to see a lot of changes in what we do with rodeos on television right off the bat? No, I don't think we are. Over time, perhaps. But over the next few months, as we're talking the second week in January, you're not going to see a lot change in terms of the rodeos that we're already televising, we're already producing. Over time, there may be some things that will happen. National Finals Rodeo next year, maybe we won't do 2 separate pre-shows, for example. We had 2 separate pre-shows going this year because the acquisition of the Cowboy Channel was going so late. There was the Teton Ridge pre-show with J.B. Mooney and Stetson Wright and Jackie Crawford and Casey Field, and then there was the Cowboy Channel pre-show that was going on simultaneous to it. Here's what I really think the first thing people are going to start to see is, I'm speculating because nobody has said, okay, here's what the timeline is. I think you're going to start to see more creativity, maybe more outreach, maybe some additional opportunities to do some fun things with our programming, in addition to all the rodeos we televise. How that's going to morph, I have no idea. I know we talk about all kinds of things in the back room that it wouldn't be appropriate to bring up because they may or may not ever become true. But I really think this is going to be a positive over time. The folks at Teton Ridge are still really figuring out. They signed the paperwork. They acquired the Cowboy Channel. Then it was Thanksgiving. Then it was the NFR. And all the plans were in place for the National Finals Rodeo on the Cowboy Channel. And all the plans were in place for the National Finals Rodeo on Teton Ridge. And so we got through that. We had Christmas. We had New Year's. And so now, really, I think the people at Teton Ridge are now starting to take a look at, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? What changes are we going to make? What's going to stay the same? And so over time, you will see all of that come together. I really think over time, you're going to see maybe a fresh look at some of our programming, maybe an opportunity to expand some things, maybe, some of the talent that you saw on the Teton Ridge pre-show now all of a sudden is doing a show here on the Cowboy Channel, things like that. I don't know. Everything I said might be totally wrong, but I'm optimistic that this is going to be good for all of us, good for Teton as the owners of the company, good for all of us in the Western way of life who benefit from everything that's happened in the rodeo business.
I know Jackie has worked for him for a few years now doing that pre-show and worked with Joe, and she loves it. She loves them. The way they handle their business, the optimistic.
Yep.
One of the things that I've seen, I did a podcast last month with Kimes Ranch, and they really brought me into their perspective, and I loved it, Steve. They were so fresh with, these things kind of get thrown at us, but you know what, we're going to do this. I loved their optimistic outlook on it, even though things were getting thrown at them in such a direction that was so petty. There was a lot of pettiness getting thrown in their direction. And when they were telling me about some of the petty stuff that was happening, it was like, well, in certain areas, that's kind of been the culture.
Yeah.
The culture has been kind of top down where certain petty things were done. Well, then the contestants are petty back to them. And it's kind of, in that revolving wheel. And when they showed up and they're like, we're not going to go that route. We're going to do the best event that we can. And this is how we're going to do it. And we're going to try to do it because we think it's the best thing to do. And we think the breakaway ropers deserve it. And I just loved it. It was so fresh. I loved it.
Yeah.
And when I've talked to Jackie, when she would go and do the pre-shows, she spoke the same thing of just how positive everyone was, what their outlook was. And I love that some of that professional business structure is getting putting into our industry a little bit, because I think when we're trying to go forward and we're trying to make it in a positive light, to me, that is going to go forward faster.
I agree with everything you just said. And I'm just now starting to get to know. It was really kind of interesting during my life during the National Finals Rodeo. The first 2 days were pretty well consumed by the breakaway finals. And then starting the first day of the NFR on that Thursday, I did a show at 11 o'clock in the morning, The Call, my podcast on television. Did Western Sports Roundup at 4 o'clock. Well, that meant getting from the Las Vegas Convention Center to the South Point in time to do Western Sports Roundup. You're thinking, okay, well, you got 4 hours. Yeah, you're driving in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
It can take you 45 minutes
as
to
bird
get
flies,
from.
you can probably get there in a minute.
Yeah, and as the traffic works, you can get there in a half an hour or 45. And then I'd turn around and go back out to the Thomas and Mack and be on the rodeo telecast. And so there wasn't a whole lot of time for, meetings or get-togethers or. We were all just kind of focused on doing what we were supposed to do. And I thought everything turned out great. I thought the NFR telecast was really good this year. I do feel a little bit guilty that there were some people on social media who saw Steve Kenyon as a jinx. I don't know if you saw that or not, but who was it one night?
Well, they said it one time. You talked about something and then it happened. They're like, don't see. That was awesome.
Whoever the team of team ropers was that was winning the average after the first 5 go rounds.
Yeah, there was that, and then maybe it was Jake Smith or Clay Smith, maybe too. But it was something.
Clay actually came up to me and said, "Please don't talk about me on TV tonight." And so I actually that was starting to wear on me a little bit toward the end of the rodeo, which has nothing to do with your question about Teton. It was just kind of a funny thing that happened, but. None of us really had a chance to interact all that much, I guess.
It is so fast out there.
It's so fast. Everything is just
so quick.
You get there and it's day number 1, and then, next thing you know, you're getting on a plane and flying home.
Yeah. So fast.
Now I think everybody from Teton Ridge is really looking at everything that is involved in this, and they're trying to figure out what they can do to make it better. And
what do you think?
I'm kind of with you. I know Joe. I've worked with him. And I think he's one of the most wonderful and creative people that we've got in television. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I really am. When they acquired the Cowboy Channel, I think I've seen it on Facebook, and so I always like to read the comments just to see what people's questions are, and kind of sidestep the complaints, because there's always going to be that. But some of the questions that I seen was interesting, and I was curious about it myself. Is what do you think their intent is? Like what do you think the reason is that they're wanting what got? Because when you think about it, I think what Thomas told, he came from outside the industry, and he's a movie producer. He's made a very large presence in our industry all of a sudden. So I think when someone kind of comes out of nowhere, there's always going to be questions. I wonder what drawn him to this industry, and also I wonder what he's wanting to do with this.
I think you have to think about what is it about the Western way of life right now that would draw a company from outside the Western way of life into wanting to have a major television presence. And perhaps the answer is going back to what we talked about at the very beginning of this show, that the Western way is doing really well right now, and it's popular. And it's not just Yellowstone, and it's that this sport and this industry is growing by leaps and bounds. A lot of people want to seem to be a part of it. And how can we, in a television presence and a media presence, have an impact? Eventually, everybody wants to make a profit doing these things. You're nuts if you don't, because it's hard to keep the doors open if you're not profitable. But I think the answer to your question is Teton has been committed to, whether it's the work that they've done through the American, whether the Alliance, something that I've always wanted to go watch and I never had a chance to was, and it's not affiliated with the American anymore. It's in July, I think now, that big rain cow horse event that they put on the night before the American at AT&T Stadium.
I was wanting to watch that too.
I would love to go see that someday, because those are some of the greatest horsemen and women on the planet, and some of the greatest horses.
Some of the greatest athletes.
Yeah.
For as far as in the horse flesh, it is amazing what those athletes can do. And best trainers, like you said.
That's why I say, coming up with creative ideas like that, if we could start to apply some of that to our programming and to now start to expand a little bit our outreach and some of the other things that we do. I'm awfully proud of Western Sports Roundup over the last few years. I've been here and I've been gone and I've been back, and I'm glad that I'm back.
Well, you're an amazing stat man, because I've came in here, you've invited me up on that show a lot of times with my military event, and to watch you work and the stuff that goes on in your head for you to be able to keep up with it is fascinating.
It's all Google, Charlie. Don't be fooled.
How did you just kind of become that? Because I've talked to some of the people you work with, and they call you the rodeo encyclopedia.
Yeah, well, I appreciate him saying that. After 30 years of announcing rodeos, I better have something stuck back in this cluttered up mind somewhere. Coming from football, basketball, baseball, you better have your stats in order in those events to be able to broadcast. And coming into rodeo, I'll tell you part of the thing with me. If I ever win the lottery, Charlie, I am going to hire you to teach me how to rope. And the reason I'm going to do it after I win the lottery is because you're going to become so damn frustrated trying to teach me how to swing a rope. I've not done the things that you guys in the arena do. I've never felt like I could speak to the nuances of what made a good head loop and what made a bad head loop. And I've never tried because I don't feel like I'm that much of an expert. But I do feel like I can talk about the numbers. I can talk about the people. I can talk about the family. I can talk about the new dad. I can talk about, the third generation roper. I can talk about those kinds of things. And I'm going to leave the nuances of why you caught horns as opposed to why you caught a neck as opposed to why your loop shrunk and you missed completely to somebody else. So me staying in my lane, those are the things that I want to approach, and those are the things that I want to talk about.
I'll bet doing baseball, because baseball's a lot of
baseball's a step. Broadcasting baseball, interestingly enough, to me, is the closest thing to either announcing or broadcasting rodeo out there. And I say that because rodeo has a certain set of starts and stops. There's always a little bit of blank space somewhere in the middle you got to cover. Baseball does the same thing, maybe more so. But I mean, you've got a 2.5. What's the clock they put on baseball games now? They're trying to make them all 2.5 hours or less. You've got this event where some guy throws a 90-mile-an-hour fastball that gets to a catcher in 2 seconds, and maybe something happens, and maybe it doesn't. And then you're on to the next pitch, and then you're on to the next batter. And I grew up listening to people do play-by-play for football, basketball, and baseball who were the greatest storytellers you'd ever listen to. The reason Vin Scully is the greatest broadcaster of all time, the longtime voice of the Dodgers, who also did a bunch of football on television, is nobody could tell a story like he could. Nobody could paint a picture like he could. And to me, that's kind of what I've always tried to fall back on is, how can I tell a story? How can I make this person in a cowboy hat in the 18 seconds that I have in the rodeo arena to tell this guy's story or this lady's story? How can I make this person more than just the next guy in the cowboy hat to the people that are sitting in the stands? And you're not going to be able to pull it off with everybody, but if you can really tell your story, tell Jackie's story, tell Josie Connor's story, tell Shane Hanchey's story, tell Keenan Hayes' story, tell Stetson Wright's story, whomever, a little bit more than the folks knew before, and make this person more than just that guy that rode the bull or that guy that roped the steer. I think you've done a good job.
Yeah. I know.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, for sure. I was talking to Katie Lucas on the way up here and was trying to get dirt on you, and
oh, good.
She was saying that she's like, I'm telling you that somebody that can think on his feet and be able to get out of a certain situation. I think she was talking about when maybe lightning had struck somewhere and there was like 45 minutes or something like that, and that was like the nightmare, she said, of like the things that could happen.
Yeah.
And you were able to fill in those blanks and keep everything
I forget where
rolling.
that was, but yeah. I remember years and years and years ago, you entered the Omac Stampede a bunch in your career, and I announced the Omac Stampede for 20 years. Remember how hot it used to always get up in Omac?
Yes. One of the hotter places that people don't realize.
Yeah. On the second week in August, you could go from, it would be 105 degrees in Hermiston and drive up to Omac the next day, and it'd be another 100.
I remember 118 one time when I was out there shoeing horses, and the nails were burning my mouth. It was so hot.
We had a power outage in Omac one night, and Keith Isley, I remember, was the clown. And it was Saturday night, which means the place was jammed full, 7,000 people. There was one. It basically what happened is a couple of breaker boxes had overheated. Just simply.
Yeah.
And there was one working light bulb in the entire facility. It was in the announcer stand about 2 feet above my head. And and Keith went out in the arena, and because we still had power in the announcer stand, the sound system was still working. And so we were able to do some things to try to entertain the crowd while they fixed the power outage and got the lights back on. And I told Keith when we got done, I said, that was really, Keith Isley's going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. He's one of the greatest of all time. And I said, that was unbelievable. He said, you have no idea how much fun I thought it was standing there watching you swat the bugs away, because literally the only light working in that entire facility at night in August in Omak, Washington, was 2 feet above my head, and every single flying creature in Okanagan County gravitated to that spot. And he said, it was, I'm standing there, and you're standing there going like this, waving your hands in front of your face. But we handled it.
Yeah.
You just got to handle it. You got to figure out how to make it all work somehow.
When she was talking about that, I was like, I'll bet that's where years of announcing makes you sharp on your feet. Because those things happen a lot at rodeos.
Yeah.
Well, I know she said, just to explain on your character, she said that like when Steve Kenyon shows up, he is so loved. They said when he shows up, that it's almost like a security blanket shows up, and that everything's going to be okay. And so I think it's important for a lot of people to get to know you and then know, you've been that way for all of us kids growing up that you've announced to, every rodeo committee that I've talked to that, you're a part of, and everyone speaks so highly of you. And it's great to get to know you. And I think this is fun to get to know the guy that brags on everyone else.
Yeah, I really appreciate Katie saying that. We have right now at the Cowboy Channel, we have some amazing people. Katie's interesting because she and Janie got married within 2 months of each other, and now they're both having babies within 2 months of each other, or 3. But Katie is, if you listen to Katie growing up as Miss Rodeo Canada, but as the daughter of one of the greatest calf ropers of all time, Joe Lucas, with a brother, Kyle, who's a very talented roper. She herself is she can head a steer for you.
Mm-hmm.
She can turn a steer if you need a steer turn. But she has knowledge. She has knowledge about the intricacies of what happens in the arena, far superior to mine. We've got a great crew. Ty and I know what we're doing. I know what Ty's going to say before Ty says it, and Ty knows what I'm going to say before I say it. We've got some very talented people, and that's why I'm pretty optimistic that this Teton Ridge will just allow all of us to expand on that and grow even further.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Charlie, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you.